Hello, welcome everyone. We're excited that you're here with us today. My name is Brigid Bright. I'm the Associate Executive Director for CASE, which is the Council of Administrators of Special Education. Our mission is to advance the field of special education through professional learning, policy, and advocacy. And we're happy to be joined today with our great partners, Let's Go Learn, to offer this special behavior series. This is the second installment in the series. All of these sessions will be recorded and they'll be posted on the CASE website as well as the Let's Go Learn YouTube channel. So if you would like to review this information again or perhaps share it with some of your colleagues in your district, please feel free to access the information there. It's my great pleasure to be joined today with Richard Capone, the leader of Let's Go Learn, and his team that's going to share about the power of prevention, building strong behavior systems. So Richard, I'll kick it to you.
All right, thank you very much for the nice intro, Dr. Bright. So I just want to comment a couple things. First of all, CASE is a great organization to work with. I know this is open to everyone, so not everyone's a CASE member, but I always tell people CASE is the de facto organization to join if you're a special ed director, administrator, or EC director. And I think it's really important for all this networking and to be able to collaborate with colleagues. There's so many new SPED directors out there. It's really, really helpful. But as far as Let's Go Learn, we've always focused on the academic side. So we have a precision diagnostic assessment and instruction for reading and math. But more recently, we've really built up our ability to handle behavior and with Aimee and Aimee and team. And part of it is because behavior is the other side of the MTSS triangle, right? We address academics. Now, how can we address behavior? Aimee Dupree has a great experience and background, former EC special ed director, a principal, many, many years as an administrator. Aimee Adams is a coordinator working at large districts implementing autism behavior supports. So both of these people are professionals who today are going to really share with you a lot of the roll up your sleeves, how do you get it done? And that's really what we're all about. You can have great solutions, but if you don't operationalize it for everyone, it really doesn't mean anything, right? And so in this series, we are trying to operationalize it for you. And so I hope you enjoy and thank you for attending. All right, Aimee and Aimee.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard, for that introduction. We are, again, Aimee and Aimee with Let's Go Learn, and one of our passions is behavior. And we are so excited to be part of this three-part series. When we last spoke last week, we talked about how to know where to begin. And today we're going to really focus on how to organize for success. And part of that organization is understanding the function of a behavior problem-solving team and how that team drives the decisions within a school. So we are excited to get started today. So last time we discussed knowing where to begin. We talked about knowing where to start. We discussed the different types of information used, such as the number of office referrals that might come your way, the number of fires that you might see that you're putting out in your buildings from day to day, or even disproportionality numbers. We know that, like a tsunami, there are just a number of factors that lead a school or a district to know that change is needed. And when we think of behavior, it kind of sometimes seems almost insurmountable in making these changes, because when we're talking about changes, we're talking about roots of belief systems and how people have always understood behavior, always understood how to react to behavior. And so oftentimes that change becomes really difficult. And when you start looking at the roots of a belief system, you're ultimately making those paradigm shifts. And paradigm shifts are difficult and they're met with resistance at times. It's because when you start to pick at changing a person's belief system or their way of operating, their way of doing business, you're really trying to change someone's core, their core way of viewing a situation. And as a leader, when you know it's time to make that paradigm shift, or you know you've got to do something different, you know what those hurdles are going to be, and you know in your building who some of those resistors are going to be and the challenges that's going to bring. But really, big change, it requires big vision. And so one of the biggest paradigm shifts that we encounter is, like Richard said to begin with, is viewing the MTSS triangle with the same lens that we do the academic side. And this is a huge shift for a lot of educators because at the fundamental level, educators like to present the rules, they like to say the do's and the don'ts, and they just want the students to follow them. But seeing the need to intervene and teach, just like we do with academics, is a big shift. And we are pretty good as a profession at looking at the MTSS triangle academically. We know that there's a core where 80% of our students respond. We know that there's that tier 2, that supplemental intervention piece, where we have some students who need a little more. And then we know that there is that intensive academic piece where we have tier 3 interventions for students who need a lot. And that is few. So if you think about core being all, and tier 2 being some, and tier 3 being a few, academically transitioning that to the behavior side then becomes a real paradigm shift. So when we start to see that triangle in the way that I just described, both academically and behaviorally, those become these terms here on the screen become those foundational central understandings to creating that paradigm shift. So understanding that behavior is learned, understanding that behavior is communication, and that behavior influences behavior. Positive behavior will influence positive behavior, just like negative behavior will influence negative behavior. It has a function and it serves a purpose, and that ultimately maladaptive behavior is a result of a skill deficit. So the primary fundamental paradigm shift here is teaching is required to address it. And when you start thinking about the behavior side of the triangle alongside these premises, then you know that you're going to need a team in order to support leading that change in a building. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How to establish a team, how to move the masses, because it really becomes that synergy. It becomes that way of doing business. And so it's the synergy of the group. It's the synergy within the understanding that's going to fuel those changes. Additionally, a team is going to remove the "I said so" from the administrator. A team approach is going to build collective efficacy, and it really is the collective that helps move your entire staff. So as you're shifting from looking at the MTSS triangle for academics to behavior, you really have to apply that same approach when you're creating a team. So if your school typically relies solely on the administrator or the guidance counselor to handle behavior, then this is another paradigm shift for you. Ultimately, the job of a team is to engage that entire staff. So why do you need a team? Well, we talked last time about the knowing and doing gap, and that this gap can be really big, and that moving from one side of this gap, from knowing something needs to be done to defining some clarity of action, is not a one-person job. It really is a movement, and it is polarized around the idea that change is needed, and it's needed collectively. So once you mobilize your team and create clarity of action, you're able to effectively start to move all of that data on the knowing side into actionable data on the doing side. This picture is not a team. This is one administrator. An administrator has to have the lens and all the additional areas of the school as their focus, but a single person cannot bridge that knowing and doing gap alone. And when they try to do that, because of their wider lens and focus, they often end up kind of just falling back into what they've always done. And that is suspensions, in-school suspensions, punishments. It's just the quick and easy way to address those behaviors. And we don't want it to be the quick and the easy way anymore. We want that fundamental paradigm shift to happen. And so the role of this team then begins to become digging down at the root of the problem. And paradigm shifts, again, are often difficult and met with that resistance. But we want, with respect to behavior, people to start kind of hacking at the leaves, not to hack at the leaves. We want them to really start to dig at the roots of the problem. And so We don't want them to suspend or to push the student through the special education process or to just get a student removed from class. Those responses do not dig at the root of the problem. That's kind of like hacking at the leaves and are short-term fixes. And we're really looking at a lot of those deeper seated issues. So when you start to get at the roots, you begin to focus on shaping behavior for lasting change and ensuring that the environment is established to support positive behavior and that you're using data to drive behavior decisions. And it really does require a team to make those global decisions and to dig at the roots. So in other words, a team is going to support and create the systems that lead to performance implementation. And again, last time we talked about paper process systems and buildings is really that hacking at the leaves. It isn't performance until your data provides evidence that what you're doing has positive effects on student behavior. And this means that you're not operating just down at core and then just in tier 3 with those students on fire. It means that you really have strong systems that move throughout your tiers. So you have strong tier 2 systems in place as well. And everybody here has a version of a paper or a process system, but the trick is kind of to leverage what you've got going on in your building in order to turn it into that performance system. And performance systems are delineated by positive outcomes over time. And it really takes a team, not just a single person, to oversee how those processes work within a building. So when we think about our academic triangle, then the problem solving team has a function in tier 1, it has a function in tier 2, and it has a function in tier 3. And we're going to talk about what those different functions are for the teams today within each tier. But again, it is important to remember that when students can't read, we make those interventions. When they can't multiply, we have to intervene. And when students don't behave, we have to intervene as well. And so we want the behavior side of the triangle to mirror the function of the academic side. And we want to make sure that we have the right interventions in place, that we're monitoring those interventions for fidelity, because it's only the fidelity of the data that ensures that as students move through the tiers, we're meeting them at their exact points of need, and that as a school, we're being responsive with the processes and systems in place. And that is not a one-man job. It is a total school effort, and we're working on building that collective efficacy and that synergy around what we do as a school amongst the tiers.
So if you remember when we talked last time, we introduced our core behavior assessment tool. The CBAT, as we call it, is used at the school level to assess the health of your school core supports and systems across those tiers. It's designed to remove the objectivity and to really ensure that you are assessing fidelity of performance implementation. The tools also help schools and districts prioritize areas of opportunity. And although there are 56 elements that are spread across 11 different domains, the CBAT has an element that focuses specifically on how well teams are functioning within the building. I really don't think it's possible to overemphasize the importance of having a specific team that meets regularly to review behavior data. As we have worked to support behavior problem solving teams in schools across the country, one of the factors that influences success of their implementation is the existence of this behavior problem solving support team. I hear, oh, we all know Johnny, trust us. We talk about him every day. Or I can hear our teachers do a great job of keeping us, the administrators, in the loop about what's happening with Johnny. Or maybe it's, we only have 3 or 4 kids that are really tier 3 kids in our school. We don't need a specific team to talk about them. The purpose of that behavior problem solving team is not just to talk about students, it's to review data, to determine the effectiveness of the current intervention plan, and then based on those data based results, make recommendations. Simply knowing what is going on with the student is not at all the same as knowing if your interventions are working. And the behavior problem solving team is a key element in ensuring that you are progressing towards a goal. So again, when we look at, when we look at this behavior triangle, the behavior problem solving team is really heavily involved in those tier 2 and tier 3 decision making. And again, as we make those decisions, it's based on data. The teams are reviewing entrance rubrics to see if a student qualifies for additional support, maybe moving from tier 1 to tier 2 or tier 2 back down to tier 3 or up to tier 3, or if a student is ready to decrease support because they learn those new skills, we hope to start to bring them back down to core. Are we able to start to fade some of our resources and supports around a student so that they can again become a part of that group that we are able to intervene with globally? Behavior problem solving teams are also looking at individual student data and helping to make decisions about the need to revise plans or intensify interventions. They're using that data to help align the interventions with the functions of those target behaviors. As part of this process, the behavior problem solving team is also reviewing that data to ensure fidelity of implementation. Are the adults in the building implementing those evidence-based behavioral supports consistently across teachers, classrooms, and time? The behavior problem solving team becomes a small team of individuals who can receive some targeted professional development that they can then share back to that larger school community in order to really help build capacity. We recognize how difficult it is to find time to do whole staff professional development, but when you have a team who is dedicated to meeting the needs of students with behavioral challenges in your building, sometimes pulling away 3 or 4 or 5 individuals from a school is sustainable, and those teachers can bring that knowledge back and push it into your PLCs or into your whole staff meetings or through one-on-one modeling and engagement with teachers in their classrooms. So how do you figure out who should be a part of this behavior problem solving team? You really want to leverage the talents of your staff, which means you as the administrator have to be really intentional about selecting members of this team. You need to know if the media center coordinator is just really great at whole class management. He serves all the people in your entire building and just really has a knack for it. You don't want to pick just somebody who hasn't been put on a team yet and put them on this team. You want to make sure that you develop an understanding and commitment with individuals prior to them deciding to join the team. Make sure they understand what they are becoming a part of, because this group is really that catalyst for supporting school behavior processes and problem solving. So you want some of your strongest people in your building involved with supporting decisions and evaluating that data as it comes in. They are really, the behavior problem solving team is a companion to that academic problem solving team. So just like your academic team, these are some broad general functions of your behavior problem solving team. They're going to meet regularly. They're going to have agendas, minutes, a process to follow through. Those behavior problem solving team members have an expertise in knowledge that they're bringing to the table in order to help support that analysis and decision making. Feel free to also incorporate family, community, or other agency supports. Oftentimes we have individual counseling and mental health supports that are outside agencies that are a part of our school community and work directly with some of our tier 2 and tier 3 students, inviting them to the table so that they can share their own lens on what that looks like can be exceptionally helpful. Remember, that data is what brings objectivity and fairness to decision making. And that is done by promoting fair interventions. When we are looking at the data, we can better assess and make needs-based decisions, because fair isn't doesn't mean equal for everyone. Fair means everyone has equal access. So we can really develop some data-driven plans that we can then use that data to support monitoring and accountability. We can track intervention effectiveness. We can identify any intervention issues early and modify what we're doing. Just because a plan ended up on paper, that doesn't make it forever. We want these plans to be really fluid and responsive to the needs of our students. And the only way we can assess those needs are by looking at data. And we want to make some systematic tier movements. And again, those needs-based decisions. Are we using data to determine entry and exit to and from tiers 2 and tiers 3? Are we using that data to move kids back down into core? Because remember, that is always our goal, is to move students back down through these levels of support into core. We want to continuously be making revisions on student plans, on school plans, and in using that data to then share that back out, to let teachers be able to see that success, to share with families when maybe they've only been used to getting that phone call about the issues that their particular student is having in class. Share out this new data that starts to share success and growth for their student. Where do we get this data? There are multiple resources that should be tapped in order to flush out a full picture of both the health of your school behavior support systems and the health of individual plans that you have moving to support students who are a part of your tier 2 and your tier 3. So you can look at discipline data. Maybe that's office referrals, majors and minors. Maybe you're looking at academic performance. Is this student passing all of their classes? Are they attending all of their classes? What are the work completion rates for this student? Into attendance, are they missing routinely full days of school, half days of school? For some of your older students in middle school and high school, are they skipping classes? You can also ask students to provide some self-assessment data and teachers to provide some self-assessment data that helps to look at growth. We know that self-monitoring is an effective evidence-based strategy for helping students to develop new skills. So looking at that data through the student lens to see if they feel like they are growing and making a difference. Teacher observations. Don't be afraid. Again, one of the responsibilities of this quality and depth of intervention. That means you need to go back and look and ensure that your teachers are doing the things you've asked them to do. I had somebody just a couple days ago, as Aimee and I were engaged in problem solving with some administrators at the school level, who says we give them all these great ideas, and then when we check back in, we find out that nothing's been done. That's getting stuck in that paper implementation phase where we've kind of made a plan for a student, but nobody's going back in and actually observing to ensure that that plan is being implemented with fidelity. Nobody's going back in and ensuring that teachers understand how to implement those interventions that the team recommended. If you are recommending a check-in and check-out, you need to ensure that the person you're recommending implement that knows how to do it. So again, that behavior problem solving team can help build capacity with your teachers if they don't understand specific interventions, but you need to look back and then make sure through observation it's happening. Parents can provide really valuable input. They live with their students all the other hours of the day where they're not at school with us. And they have to know how to de-escalate their kids. They have to know how to read moods and emotional flux with their kids. They know how to comfort and care for their kids. So involve them in this process so that they are mirroring and modeling a lot of the things that we're doing at school, at home, and we can mirror and model some of the things that are happening at home, at school. And when you use data to support these conversations, it helps to bring back that emotionality that can sometimes come into play when we're talking about behavior. So what does a behavior problem solving team do at the core level? So let's dive into some of those team responsibilities at core. So to start with, you determine those systems at each tier. who communicates what those systems look like, who's going to teach these systems out. This is really, if you remember, when we met last at that core level where we're determining and implementing all of those strategies in order to create a solid and healthy core through all of those tiers, not just at tier 1. You're going to review core data. You're going to look at that school level behavior data, office referrals, majors and minors, in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension data. And you're reviewing that to look for actionable trends in that data. We don't want to just sit around and admire all the lovely data that's coming in. We want to use that data to inform decision making that leads to actionable steps that either the whole school, teachers, or administrators can take in order to start to create even more success in their buildings. They're responsible for assessing the core using our core behavior assessment tool, or another one of the core assessment tools that are freely available to be able to use. You need to gather that data 3 times a year to kind of see, are we growing and moving in the right direction? You're going to support the establishment of school-wide goals based on that CBAT data, along with some of those other data sources that we've talked about today. It's important to have a goal and a plan for reaching that goal at the school level, the same as it's important to have a behavior goal and a behavior support plan at the individual student level. When we want to create behavior growth and change, we need to have a plan, and we need to use data to evaluate the success of that plan. We're going to ensure that foundational systems are run effectively because we're going to review and revise them as needed. And again, a major focus of this team is to push that data back out routinely to staff and make sure everyone knows what's happening across the school. At tier 2, you're going to use that core data to start to determine if a student needs additional support. So are they able to meet your school PBIS expectations to join in the celebrations that you might have monthly to recognize students? Or is this a kiddo who is routinely lagging behind and not quite there? And you're going to pull out that tier 2 rubric and kind of have a conversation about whether or not they qualify for some supplemental support. It will help determine what interventions and data collection needs are at the tier 2 level. Remember, at tier 2, we're intervening as a cluster. We're not yet individualizing things. So what are some standardized tier 2 supplemental interventions across the school, and what kind of tools can we make easily accessible and readily available to our teachers so that we can ensure they're taking data on that student's progress using those supplemental interventions. You're going to meet regularly to review those students and their intervention data to make sure that there is that fidelity of intervention, that that student's trend line is heading in the direction that we would like it to trend in. They really become the gatekeepers into and out of tier 2. So it's not up to just any individual in the school to say, hey, I think this kiddo needs to be tier 2, so they're going to be tier 2. No, there's a process. And this behavior support team acts as that gatekeeper. And of course, again, they're going to share that data back out with that staff and the larger community. Finally, at tier 3, this is really where your behavior problem-solving team shines. You're going to be using that data to really determine the needs for additional intervention and support at the intensive level. You're going to help to problem solve what are our intensive supports for our students in our building. We're going to want to review regularly data for tier 3 kids, because often our tier 3 students are our students who are displaying behaviors that have become a risk to themselves or other students in the environment, or they are potentially exhibiting externalizing behaviors that are disruptive to the learning environment of entire classrooms or entire grade levels, or sometimes even entire schools. So we want to make sure that we're really keeping track of the data as it comes in and ensuring that these plans are starting to increase safety and decrease disruption. It's even more important to ensure fidelity of these interventions, again, because there can be a risk factor that comes in if we're not following a student's crisis plan with fidelity. It can lead to an escalation of behavior instead of that behavior being diffused. Gatekeepers for movement not only into and out of tier 3, but they're really that gatekeeper for that special education referral process. Has the student's interventions been conducted consistently over a long enough period of time where we may have concerns about their ability to access that general education environment due to some adaptive concerns? This team is responsible for reviewing data and trends that may lead to disproportionality issues, where we find that a certain subgroup of individuals is being disproportionately impacted by some of our behavior supports and structures that we have in place. We really want to be responsive to any indication that that may be happening. And again, they're going to share that data back out with staff.
So when we think about our behavior triangle, all of the parts and components that Aimee just went over that belong to the behavior team, it becomes this cycle. So it really starts with your behavior team determining what your core systems are, and not just what your core is, but what your core systems are in tier 2 and in tier 3, and what are the systems for moving students through each tier. What are the systems for sharing out data? What are the systems for review? And what does that process look like? What is the system you're going to put in place for doing your core behavior assessments 3 times a year? All of those things that Aimee just discussed, they have to be determined by this team. And then they've got to be, again, as she mentioned, taught to your stakeholders. So how are you going to inform your students? How are you going to inform your parents? And how are you going to inform your staff? And then that implementation piece, again, how well are all of these systems that this behavior team has created, how well are they running in your school? And that comes back to that huge data piece that she just talked about. It is so important because data is really where that engagement comes in. So we're going to implement all of these systems. We're going to review them with our core behavior assessment tool, and then we're going to engage with that data. We're going to engage with that data with our staff. We're going to engage with that data with our students. And so all of those intervention plans and just simple interventions or major interventions, no matter the degree, all of those are going to be data systems that we use for the individual student. And then all of the core behavior assessment tool data, that's going to be for your school. So you've got data coming into this team in a wide variety of ways. And that's where the evaluation piece and the ability to look and adjust and decide if what's working just requires us to repeat and continue doing what we're doing because it's valuable and we see positive impacts and positive trends for both students and staff, or do we need to adjust? Do we need to say that, oh my gosh, we're beginning to see some disproportionality trends, or this student is not responding appropriately to these interventions? So data becomes then a cycle of analysis and improvement for your students. And we've talked a lot about what the team does, but really it's the administrator that also needs to be part of this team. So knowing that you need a team is crucial, but being an active part of that team is even more crucial. So the reason the administrator has got to be part of this is because they have the overarching vision for the entire school. Behavior is a huge piece. It is a time-consuming piece, but it is not the only piece. And it certainly isn't the piece that often determines if things are going well in buildings. Oftentimes, that's the academic side of the triangle. That's those end of grade scores and end of course assessments that we get at the end of the year to say how well students have learned, which is the primary function of schools. So administrators have that overarching vision, and they know all of the needs and the scope of the needs, and they know where to fit the behavior problem solving team into that. Additionally, the administrator understands the data. They understand the academic data, they understand the behavior data, and all of the other data sources that exceed just the behavior team. They have the full scope of what that data is on their desk every day, and how all those cogs fit together to paint the true picture of what's happening in the building. The administrator is often the one who also has got to make those financial decisions to facilitate training needs. So they know if they have funds available to send staff to the training that the behavior team data show is part of the need. They also know who to contact at the district office level for supports that are available to come in and help schools gain the necessary training that they need to become operationalized in a very high functioning way. They also have to guide the foundation of these changes. So they have to finally say, you know what, we've got some data, it's not very positive, we've got to make those changes. And again, as we've talked about, those paradigm shifts, those foundational changes are often really difficult, but it truly is the administrator who has to say, we're going to make these changes and here's how we're going to do it. The administrator also hopefully is in that building for a long time, so they've got to ensure that sustainability. You don't want to go through this process of teaching and teaching and teaching over and over and over again and changing things. They've got to ensure the sustainability of what's happening, so that the true focus can be on the teaching aspect of what happens day to day in the building. And they've got to facilitate that alignment. Again, having the larger scope of what's happening in your building, you've got to align behavior systems with academic systems. And you've got to align your entire staff. You've got to calibrate their language for how they approach students, how you do business in your building. And that takes an administrator having a pulse, their finger on the pulse of every single aspect that's happening in a school. And then in order to do all of those things, which are weighty, your participation is a must. So ultimately, administrators are the key to a strong team, strong systems, and really the buck stops there with the administrator. And they know that the weight of the building is on them. So when you think about creating that paradigm shift, it really requires that strong leader to dive right in. So whether you're at that paper implementation stage or a process implementation stage, it's going to require you and your team to get to that performance implementation level. It's the responsibility of you as that administrator truly to create that team to support the vision that you have for your building. And it becomes what your team focuses on that's going to lead to that fidelity of implementation. Our performance implementation diver here in this example has a team behind her. She didn't just get up on that diving board and perform that particular skill to that level without having a team of coaches, her family, and a wide range of trainers and people behind her to get her there. And so you as the administrator want to reach that performance implementation level, but you really need to think about the team that's going to be supporting that vision. So today we have talked about how to organize for success, and we hope that we have given you some tips on what that team looks like and how to get started with who should be part of your team. Next time, we're going to focus on making data decisions across all of those tiers. So all of those data points that drove you to the knowing and doing gap, they ultimately transfer over from the knowing side to the doing side. And so data doesn't just go away, it really shifts. It shifts on how it's collected and how it's used. And so we're going to discuss how to make it most impactful and how to make the best decisions for your students with the use of that data on March the 18th. And we hope you will join us for that. And if you have a deeper interest in everything that we have talked about today, we have some upcoming professional development opportunities, and we encourage you to bring a team either to our training in Phoenix or our training in Florida. Both will be at the beginning of April this year. And we ask that you bring a team, if at all possible, because we give a lot of time to sort of problem solve where you are as a team and think about what your needs are and what your next steps are. And we are available to help you walk through that process. We also have our email addresses here if you want to reach out directly and ask us some additional questions about these conferences. And then lastly, we'd love to connect with you. So if you're interested in learning more about how we can support you, please go ahead and scan the QR code and we will be in touch with you. And we would love to help you with any roadblocks that you have with behavior.
All right, I think we're going to open it up to questions. Actually, I'll make a comment. I know at the conferences you're having in April, that's really an opportunity to sort of get started, right? I mean, I know teams have come and there's time for them to break out, learn, and then work and try to get their plans in place, right? Like actually start creating procedure docs,
Yeah.
and all of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we do is take all of the information that we have discussed in these past two sessions and we'll discuss in the upcoming session. And we spend a lot of time going through all of the parts of the triangle and what teams do and what the data looks like and how to collect that with forms that are easy to manage and tracking tools that are easy to manage and helping teams kind of just evaluate themselves and do some self-reflection. There is no underscoring the importance of time to work with your staff and your leadership as you can, and having that time to get granular with what's happening in your building and how to strengthen the systems that you have in place so that you really are moving from paper process to performance. And we strongly encourage teams to come because it's invaluable to sit and be honest and reflective at the same time on this really weighty topic of behavior.
Mhm. I think one of the other things that's really valuable to people who come to our sessions is that they leave with a whole workbook full of tip sheets and forms, and we help them create some actionable steps at each of those 11 checkpoints throughout that core behavior assessment process. So they go home with things that they can continue to use and take back to their school teams and roll out right away.
Yep.
That's amazing. I mean, it makes sense, right? Because why reinvent the wheel from scratch? I mean, I know, like, for instance, this is a total separate analogy, but when we wanted an employee handbook, we didn't write it from scratch. We took one. I think I had a friend at Google, and I shouldn't say that, I might get in trouble. But I just took that one and we just modified it. Although Google's probably not a good example. They're a little too young of a company. But anyway, let's see. Are there any other questions?
I just wanted to share a thought. Aimee, you were spoke very well about how administrators are key. As a former special education administrator, and I assume many on this call are the special ed administrators, you may not be the building level administrator, but still working with those building level administrators, special ed administrators, it's important that you are present and in that building and have a very solid relationship with the building level administrator that will likely be in charge of these district and data teams. And a question I had, because I know you guys have experience working in district, you guys are boots on the ground working with people. So how do you work with resistors when implementing a process like this?
I think one of the key things when we're talking about changing, again, paradigms, people's core belief systems, and that really does boil back to the resistors, is using data. Data removes that emotion from it, and data tells a story, and data isn't personal, it just is. And so when you start looking at a student as having those initial statements that behavior is learned, maladaptive behavior needs to be taught, when you start thinking about that with that lens and helping people begin to understand that also removes some emotion. It removes the need to get into power struggles with students. And so really helping them, again, to just reframe their lens that they just have a skill gap. If you don't know short vowels, we teach you short vowels. And so trying to reframe the paradigm with looking at it, again, like it's just a skill deficit, but using data to do that, it's a lot less personal, and it becomes more about helping the global school community make those shifts just for the betterment of what's happening in the building and for the success of these students. Because academic skills carry kiddos, behavior skills will carry kiddos into the workplace. It's the same foundational understanding.
And I'll piggyback and just say, oftentimes, when we talk to district level administrators or building level administrators, we talk about their need to find their first follower. So that first person who really is excited, who really has buy-in, so that you can use that representative data to say, look at this school who did the things, look how much better their data is, or look at this teacher who decided to do the things with fidelity, look at how much better that data is, or an individual student. Finding those moments of your first follower to be able to highlight and let them speak back to their journey, and to share that data can be really powerful in creating additional buy-in from your community.
So let the outcomes speak for themselves because they can be very loud, right? And what I also heard you say, if we have district level administrators that are listening today, that it's okay to start in one campus, start small, and then let those systems grow. Because if you dive in at all settings, it's very difficult to make that implementation with much fidelity. So totally heard
Dr.
that.
Bright, you are 100% spot on. We actually have lived that exact scenario. We've had a whole district start, and then we had a few other schools who were more adept at it, and those became the target focus, and the data has begun to speak for itself to now where it's going to move out more effectively to the campuses that were sort of the resistor campuses to start with. So 100%.
And I will say at the district level too, you don't always want to choose your biggest obstacle to start with, right? Sometimes we want to focus on this school that's really struggling and on fire and always the one who's the squeaky wheel, and we can't keep administrators there and we can't keep teachers there. Sometimes you don't want to start with your most difficult project as your first project. So choosing one of those schools who are already good at making some change, who already have some investment and forward momentum in making some of that change, and then letting them be your exemplar moving forward can be helpful too.
So that sort of translates to probably a school with a strong principal, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like we talked about knowing your staff to pick your team, if you're a district administrator, knowing your principals to pick your team. I mean, where's the best place to start? And you have to leverage the skills and talents of people within a building, and the skills and talent at the district level of people that you know who are ready for that. It's a great point as well.
Here's a question. How we have a strong PBIS team already. How can we leverage that with the behavior team?
So PBIS is foundational and core, but it really comes back to what do the next systems look like? That might be your team with the best knowledge around behavior systems and behavior interventions. Again, do you have the right people at the table to analyze the data, to consider the interventions, to know if interventions are being done with fidelity? And then what do those systems then look like at tier 2 and tier 3? Again, you may have something in place that is solid. You need to just expand it. And so it really comes down to asking yourself the questions of what do I have and where do I need to go, and having that vision as an administrator.
And I think our core behavior assessment tool is an excellent place to start with that. So if that PBIS team can pick up that core behavior assessment tool and do a quick assessment of the health of their core behavior systems across those tiers, it can help them then determine where they need to start to support change and support action.
All right, here's another question. What is the technology element that Let's Go Learn wants to bring to the table to this behavior issue? I could take a stab at that if that's okay. So I would say the first and foremost, the first thing is the framework and the training, right? So there's no technology solution for that. So you really have to look at your systems. What we're just trying to do is we're trying to provide tools that'll support that. So it could still be a paper and pencil process, or Google Docs, Google Sheets, whatever you want to do. But what we're doing is creating a core site survey tool so that your teams could look at it, because we already have a learning management system. We do hardcore assessment. And then we're also going to be creating a incident reporting, and I'm not sure if I'm calling that correct, minor, major, which will be a mobile phone app. So it makes it really easy for your teachers. We don't want to have sticky notes. We don't want them to have to go get a form from the office or say, oh, I ran out of, form 1A. We want to make it easy, and, everyone has a smartphone. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Aimee and Aimee.
Well, I think what you said is correct. We have that core behavior assessment tool that we will have online for folks, but we also want to have the data collection for the student side of things, but the data collection that mirrors the needs of teachers within each tier. And so the correct forms, the correct alerts to let you know when students need to move between tiers, when someone needs to be progress monitored, all of those nuanced pieces that are so important when you're looking at fidelity of data collection. That's what we're working on creating, so that it's a complete package to provide you the correct school data and the correct student data that becomes that cycle that we talked about of operationalization of the systems in your building with fidelity.
Right. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I'll let you close it out, Dr. Bright.
Wonderful. I'd just like to thank everyone that joined us today. Thank you, Let's Go Learn team, for such excellent information and supports for the profession. Again, if you are not familiar with CASE, please check out our website. I put it in the chat. It's casecec.org. And we will be back in 2 weeks with the third installment of this behavior series with our great partners, Let's Go Learn. Thank you all.
Thank you.